We have a Rockets signing incoming as Houston will target a veteran center in this year's free agency class if Steven Adams decides not to return to the Houston Rockets. We tell you why this is a top pick and everything you need to know right here on Rockets Digest. I am Jace Andrews. Welcome you in. We appreciate you joining us. If you have not already, please hit that subscribe button. We are 50 subscribers away from 1,700, and I believe we can get there today. If everybody watching this video who is not subscribed hits that subscribe button, I guarantee you we will be at 1,700. All right, let's talk about it. You saw the thumbnail. The Houston Rockets are interested in Brook Lopez if they are unable to re-sign Steven Adams. This all coming from The Athletic. Now, there's a lot to break down in this. The first thing is that Steven Adams is the priority for the Houston Rockets. That is who they would like back. However, Adams is 31 years old. He could get a starting role in a lot of NBA teams. However, not on the Rockets with Alperen Şengün. And so there has been talks about whether or not he will decide to stay in Houston. Now, does he like the culture of Houston? Yes. Does he like living in Houston? Yes. Is the team built for him to be the backup center? Yes. But that doesn't always guarantee you're going to get him. Now, the Rockets want him, but if they do not get him, that would make Brook Lopez the top priority. We go into the first report here coming from Ben DeBose of Rockets Wire saying, quote, when the Houston Rockets signed Fred VanVleet and Dillon Brooks in 2023 free agency, they also pursued Bucks center Brook Lopez. But in the final hours, Lopez spurned Houston to stay in Milwaukee, end quote. And that's kind of the funny thing about this is that the Rockets wanted Brook Lopez 2 years back when they were starting what I would call the rebuild era. Now, obviously, it took a lot less years than we thought to rebuild, but at the same time, Brook Lopez was the initial thought for the center position. Now, the reason he stayed there was kind of an interesting one. It was more or less to try and be a winner, I think is the big thing, but now it's kind of funny because the Rockets are in a place where they're in the better spot. They're in the place where, you could go out and win a NBA championship with this team. So that's a couple things to kind of talk about here with Brook Lopez and kind of seeing everything. But going on to continue the report. Now, obviously 2 years later, however, the interest from the basketball standpoint is still there. If backup center Steven Adams leaves the Rockets this offseason, the Athletic's Kelly Iko reports that Houston could again pursue Lopez in free agency. Now, Brook Lopez is a very interesting topic because he is a older guy to say. Now, I'm not going to say he's worse than Steven Adams, I'm going to say that he's not as good as Steven Adams, but at the same time, he is still a very viable option. And so I want to talk about the report here from Kelly Iko of The Athletic saying, quote, if Adams leaves, team sources said the Rockets could reignite their interest in Brook Lopez. The 37-year-old, who averaged 13 points per game, 5 rebounds, and 1.9 blocks per game, while shooting 37% from 3 in Milwaukee last season, was previously a target for Houston. He would theoretically be a fit given his two-way production and health. Now, he played 237 games over the last 3 seasons, end quote. And again, when you're looking for a backup center, health is key. And I'm not saying Alperen Şengün is injury prone or going to get injured, but you want to have someone in the wings that is always going to be ready, and Brook Lopez is certainly that. And again, Steven Adams is what the Rockets want. I want to kind of make that very clear. Brook Lopez has a lot to bring, but Steven Adams, although the stats aren't there, his plus minus is crazy comparing what he has done in the league. His field goal percentage is pretty high. And again, he's 31 compared to Brook Lopez, who is 37 years old. His rebounds of 5.6 is good. And I say again, the defense is what you're getting from Steven Adams. And on top of which, the big reason why they want Steven Adams more than Brook Lopez, and again, why Brook Lopez is an option, is the double big lineup. That's what they really, really liked at the end of the season last year. You saw that with Alperen Şengün. Sometimes Tari Eason would go in there, and you had Steven Adams, and the double big lineup worked. Especially when Steven Adams was on the court, he was a huge plus-minus guy. His plus was upwards of 10 points pretty much every time he was out on the court in the playoffs. And so, yes, you can bring in Brook Lopez, and he would be great. But you'd have to kind of mold the offense and figure out the double big once again with him. Not to say it can't work, it's just Steven Adams knows what's going on. He was here last season. He has the playoff knowledge and the playoff success and the familiarity with this team that you almost would rather have him to continue on with this team rather than, I'm not going to say start over. Brook Lopez is a 37-year-old NBA vet. He would do what the Rockets needed him to do. But you want Steven Adams more for the simple reasons that I just put. Now, Brook Lopez, again, if it does happen where Steven Adams does leave, He is a very, very great option. 13 points per game, as you mentioned, 5 rebounds. He is 37, but his field goal and 3-point percentage are actually pretty dang good. Now, again, it's so funny when you think about how the NBA works and timelines, everything, because the Rockets wanted Lopez 2 years ago, and it just ended up happening because Brook wanted an NBA championship. That's what he's looking for, and he thought the Bucks had a better shot at that. Well, now the tables have turned. It looks like Giannis will be traded, which we'll have more reports on that as he is looking like a top priority for the Houston Rockets. We'll tell you more on that in a future video, but at the same time, Lopez now looks at the Rockets and says, okay, Rockets are 52 wins last year, second in the Western Conference, a young team, need a backup center. Okay. The Bucks, well, Giannis might leave. Lillard's out next year. It seems like they're going into a minor rebuild here for the next year or so. It seems like the Rockets are the better fit. So, I think Lopez has a very strong interest in coming to Houston, especially if the Rockets were able to land Giannis Antetokounmpo. In that situation, there's a lot of things that could happen. You could land Giannis and still re-sign Steven Adams, but in that Giannis trade, it could involve Alperen Şengün, and then you need 2 centers. Maybe you bring in Lopez after all. You start Steven Adams and Lopez is your backup. Now, do I want to trade Alperen Şengün? No. But I'm saying there's a bunch of different situations that could come from this. And honestly, there is a way where the Rockets retain Steven Adams and still, I'm going to say, have to sign Brook Lopez if they have a trade that involves Alperen Şengün for Giannis. And so there's a lot of things to kind of look at this. Obviously, it's all hypothetical in a lot of ways, but Lopez is guaranteed to be the target if the Rockets do miss out on the Steven Adams, I'm going to call it sweepstakes. So kind of a bunch of things to look at there. Now, I mentioned the double big lineup, and that was something that was also mentioned in the article as this has been DeBose who said both Adams and Lopez could potentially play alongside Şengün in double big lineups, which the Rockets increasingly used in the 2024-2025 season. And the ability of Lopez to also hit three-pointers could mitigate some of the floor spacing concerns with those units, though Adams is clearly the superior rebounder. And I think that's the thing that you have to look at, is the Rockets are a defensive team. That is the way they want to be. And Steven Adams is I'm going to call him an Ime Udoka type player. That is the guy he likes, and he likes that kind of like good plus-minus bully ball in some ways. And Brook Lopez, although he can be that, is just not the same as Steven Adams. Now, things happen, things change, and Steven Adams could easily go away because there's not a starting role here for the Houston Rockets. And I think that's something that is almost overlooked in a lot of ways because you know that he could be a starter on a lot of NBA teams. And that's where we go into Ben DeBose again saying, quote, Houston's priority will be Adams, who is several years younger and is coming off an extremely strong run in the 2025 NBA playoffs. But as an unrestricted free agent, he will have other options, and the Rockets can't offer a starting role, given the presence of all-star incumbent Alperen Şengün. I think that's the end of the line there is, if Steven Adams wants to stay with the Rockets to try and win an NBA championship, to try and build off what they did last year, he's in a great spot, and he will for sure be re-signed to a very good contract, I think. If he wants to be a starter, then the Rockets is not the place for him. And as much as the Rockets want him, as much as the Rockets would give him a very good deal for a backup center, it's not going to be a starting role. Now, he will play a bunch, and the double big lineup almost forces him into I'm going to call it 6 minutes. It's not what it is, but he's going to play a lot of minutes, given how present that double big lineup was in the end of the season, and, of course, how much it was present in the playoffs. So, I think if you're Steven Adams, the choice is yours. You can be a starter, and that's great, and you're going to go make good money, and I would totally not wrong him for doing that. Or you can stay with the Houston Rockets. You can play in that double big lineup. You can be in line for an NBA championship, or at least a Western Conference Finals appearance. There's a lot of proper things that could come from that, and I think that's a big thing to kind of look at. Now, I mentioned it earlier in the video, but I do want to go back to Ben DeBose one last time, where he kind of talked about what I said, saying, quote, interestingly enough, one of the reasons Lopez stayed with the Bucks 2 years ago was presumably the fact that Milwaukee appeared much closer to title contention. And now here we are, a couple years later, and it seems as though the Rockets are way closer to title contention than the Milwaukee Bucks. Now the Western Conference is way more loaded, but As I said, Steven Adams kind of plays the cards here. If he wants to come back to the Rockets will make the deal work for him. It will be a good deal, and they will sign him to a good amount of money for a backup center. If he wants to go make maybe a little more money and go out and get a starting role somewhere, that's great. But I believe Brook Lopez is waiting in the wings and will sign as soon as that domino falls with Steven Adams. So if we do see a signing of Steven Adams elsewhere in the league come free agency, which again, that starts around the end of June. I believe July 1st is kind of when things are going to get really, really rolling. So make sure you subscribe for that, be involved, and be ready for all that because it's going to be a hectic time. But if Steven Adams does sign elsewhere, I would imagine within the day, the next week, in that similar time frame, it will be a move made for Brook Lopez if he has not already signed with somebody else, obviously. That's kind of where it would kind of stink if Lopez signed a deal early and then Steven Adams left. Then you're kind of waiting for a different center to try and go out there. So a lot of things to digest here for the Houston Rockets, but all I do know is that the Houston Rockets are in a good spot, and this offseason is going to be very, very fun. And so if you're ready for it, hit that subscribe button. And as always, peace out, Rockets Nation.